Salam everyone. Welcome to Quran Contradictions Debunked, episode 10. Can Allah have a son without a wife? What we will prove. Christians claim that Allah is not all-powerful because they say that the Quran says Allah cannot have a son without a wife, therefore not making him all-powerful. I will now play some clips of God logic explaining the contradiction.
Allah in the Quran is shown to be dependent. He's shown that he would need help to do certain things. He depends on things outside of himself to do things. So with that logic, you would have to reject Allah of the Quran.
Not necessarily. I mean, what would you say that is?
Well, he can't have a son unless he has a mate.
I think, I think I'm very familiar with that verse. I think based on that verse, it's not saying it out of incapability. It's just saying it through like the human perspective of how we understand it. He's higher than that. He wouldn't actually do that because he's above that.
He doesn't say that. He doesn't say he's higher than that or above it. He says, how can he? He says, how can he have a son when he has no mate? So it's talking about his capability.
But then you're just limiting him by saying that. But that doesn't really make sense.
Say that again. Say that again. It's doing what by saying that?
No, hold on, bro. Let's
no, say that.
I don't know.
Come on, Gabe.
No, listen, bro. Relax.
You hit it right on the nail by saying that it's doing what to Allah?
Okay, what? Look. I don't know the Arabic context behind it.
So okay. I kind of just said that. Just say it again. It's doing what?
Okay. He's probably saying it from a different perspective.
No, brother, stop. Come on, you said the word. It started with an L. When you phrase it like that,
hold on.
It's doing what to him? It's doing what?
Like I said, I don't think it's out of incapability. He's saying that.
That's not what I asked you. So even your Quran says that he could have a son if he wanted to. That's 39:4. He could have a son if he wanted to. He would choose something from his creation. However, he would need a mate to do it.
Because I haven't read the entirety of the Quran. I'm gonna look into that so I'm gonna come back up here again soon.
Do you believe that Allah could have a son if he wanted?
You're asking a half truth and a whole lie. Because when you say something like, oh, could he do this? And the answer is within the Quran, right? That it's not befitting for you to even ask that question.
Wait. Okay, tell me where in the Quran does it say it's not befitting for me to ask this? You told me that based on the Quran, it's not permissible or befitting that I even ask this question.
No, that's not what I said. That it's not befitting for you to even ask that question. Alhamdulillah, and by the mercy of Allah, He is showcasing your stupidity. That it's not befitting for you to even ask that question, and just the embarrassment that you're bringing to the table here. Yeah. That it's not befitting for you to even ask that question.
Yeah, so I was asking whether or not Allah, if he wanted to, could he have a son?
Yemeni answered you with the Quran. Allah said he could. If
I want to know what he understood from that.
Yeah.
If Allah had intended to take a son, he could have chosen from what he creates, whatever he willed. Exalted is he is Allah, the one, the prevailing.
What does that tell you?
What? Nothing. Told me that he can have a son if he wanted. The next question to follow up is, since we know that Allah could have a son if he wanted to, could he do it by himself or would he need help? Is that a yes, he can have a son by himself, or
as if you just ignored everything we just told you.
So deal with the question. Stop complaining about it.
Let's go back to 15 minutes ago. I asked you, what do you mean by son? You said any sense of adopted or whatever. Okay. Could Allah take a son and say, this is my son, or by himself? Yes.
So he can't have a son by himself?
Yes.
Okay. The verse says that he's the originator of the heavens and the earth. How can he have a son when he has no mate? Okay. So this is showing that Allah has an inability to have a son without help. How do you guys solve this?
Allah exposing the deniers. 3 reasons people say the Quran has contradictions and deny the truth. The first reason is people will use a falsehood to say the Quran is wrong. For example, they'll say the Quran says this, but we know this, therefore the Quran is wrong. But the thing they are referring to is a falsehood. The second and third reason is they don't have knowledge of the subject and say the Quran is wrong, or they don't have correct interpretation of the verse and say the Quran is wrong. Rather, they have denied that which not they encompass in knowledge and whose interpretation has not yet come to them. The Christian does not know the correct interpretation of the verses and does not encompass it in knowledge, and is why he's denying. Mainstream translation 6101. Originator of the heavens and the earth, how can there be for him a son, while not for him a spouse, and he created everything, and he is the knower of all things? This translation doesn't look at all the Arabic words used and translate them with their true and detailed meaning. The first word that it could include more detailed is the word anna, which is translated as how, but it also has the meaning of in what way, how, in what way, how. So I have translated anna as in what way and in brackets how. Anna is like in what way, or how, or in what way. Now we get to the word waladun, which is commonly translated as son, but it has a deeper meaning. It means to bear, beget, procreate, bear, give birth to, beget, descendant, offspring, progeny. So as you can see, it has to do with a son that is created through procreation. Even the same word used in 112. Not he begets and not he is begotten. Not he begets means he doesn't give birth or be the or procreate to make a child, and not is he himself born or given birth to or the subject of procreation. So son in this verse is not just son. It's a son created through procreation. Bear, beget, procreate, bear a child, give birth to, beget, descendant, offspring, posterity, progeny. Progeny. How to have a progeny? You have to have a mate and you have to have a child. That's your progeny. It's not just the son or the general word for son or child. In the Quran, that is ibn. Walid emphasizes a son or child made through procreation. So I've actually translated waludun as a begotten son. See, beget, procreate, a son created through procreation. Not just any son. It's very important. The Arabic word here has to do with a child that is a descendant, offspring, progeny, given birth to, made through procreation, and to beget. And beget means to have a child through procreation. So the word walad is a begotten son, not just a regular son. That's ibn. And even here, you can see that it's not just son or the general word for son in the Quran, that is ibn. For example, whenever Isa is referred to, he's called Isa, son ibn Maryam. Allah uses ibn here to mean son. That is Isa ibn Maryam, son of Maryam. Not walad of Maryam, son of Maryam. So this is the word for son. And the word used in this verse is walad, which has a deeper meaning, a son or child created through procreation. So I've translated as a begotten son. 6101. Originator of the heavens and the earth, in what way, how, anna, in what way can there be for Allah a begotten son? The statement, in what way can there be for Allah a begotten son? This question seeks to understand the evidence, reasoning, or context that leads to the conclusion that he has a begotten son. It does not question the possibility of having a son who was born through procreation, but instead focuses on the specific criteria, observation, or basis used to establish the claim. This framing helps specify the grounds upon which the assertion is made, ensuring clarity and avoiding ambiguity. 6101. In what way? It's not about how he would do it, but rather what is the basis used to establish the claim. Can there be for Allah a begotten son, a son created through procreation, while not for him a spouse, and he created everything? Allah makes it clear he created everything. The question seeks to have the reader think about in what way Allah can have a begotten son, a son created through procreation, childbirth, when he has no spouse, and he has created everything. It does not state it's impossible or that Allah needs a wife to do so. The verse is stating he doesn't have a spouse, so in what way can he have a begotten son, a son created through procreation, childbirth, and when he just creates everything? It doesn't say it's impossible. The argument of the Quran is clear. Since Allah doesn't even have a spouse, how can he have a son that he made through procreation? Well, a begotten son requires procreation. Allah doesn't have a wife, so how can he have a begotten son? And on top of that, he literally just creates everything. Time for Christians to answer. The question is, in what way can there be for Allah a begotten son, a son created through procreation, while not for him a spouse, and he just creates everything? Let's say for the modern day Christians who claim that Allah has a begotten son, if you ask them this question, in what way can God have a begotten son when he doesn't have a spouse? They will tell you that they do not believe God has a literal son who was born through procreation, but instead they have their own theological definition of the statement. The fact they have to redefine the term proves the Quran is right. The statement, in its literal sense, to them is illogical. They can go on and on about how they do not believe in its literal meaning. It doesn't change the fact that that's what comes out of their mouth. God has a begotten son. The Quran, the truth, does not care for their redefined terms. Maybe in their minds, begotten is not clear enough for them. So let's make an example. The term begotten son literally means a son who was born through procreation. So if we say God has a begotten son, it is the same as saying God has a son created through procreation. Now imagine the Bible said, and the Christians always claimed, God has a son created through procreation. But when they told you that, that's not what they mean. They actually have some theological definition they believe it to mean. At this point, it doesn't matter what they say they believe. They are saying God has a son made through procreation. The usage of begotten son slips their mind, but it is no different to saying God has a son made through procreation. If we exchange the phrases, their Bible literally says, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only son made through procreation, then whoever believes in him. When they say begotten son, they are saying this. Yet somehow they redefined a son made through procreation to have a non-literal theological definition.
This would be the same thing for your religion, bro.
No, because in
Jesus
my
becomes
religion,
limited.
let me tell you, in my religion, God doesn't rely on anything outside of himself in order to have a son. Jesus is the begotten son of the Father,
Jesus is a son created through procreation.
straight from the Father's essence. The Father didn't need a companion in order to have a son and have Jesus. No, by God's own very essence, his own nature, he generates and begets Jesus, the
He procreates to make Jesus.
Son, eternally. He didn't need a mate, but Allah does. So which God is all powerful?
If Jesus is being made without a mate, why are you using terms like begotten and beget, which literally means made through procreation?
Jesus is the begotten son of the Father, straight from the Father's essence. The Father didn't need a companion in order to have a son.
So then he's not begotten, is he? He's just the son that God is creating. So why do you keep repeating over and over again that Jesus is the begotten son of God? In what way can Allah have a begotten son when he doesn't even have a spouse and he created everything? So stop your nonsense.
Straight from the Father's essence. The Father didn't need a companion in order to have a son and have Jesus. No.
Kind of sounds like you're just saying that God's creating him. You know, he doesn't have a spouse. Straight from the Father's essence. Kind of just seems like God's creating him.
Straight from the Father's essence. The Father didn't need a companion in order to have a son and have Jesus. No.
So why are you throwing terms in there like beget and begotten, which literally mean made through procreation? So it is not impossible for Allah to have a son. He can adopt one from his creation, which is exactly what God logic is saying, is that he's creating something from himself and calling it his son. The Quran is focusing on the fact that these people claim that Jesus is the begotten son, which means to create through procreation. The Quran refutes this claim by giving a consistent and logical argument about such a claim. How can Allah have a begotten son when he doesn't even have a spouse? And he created everything. For Allah to have a son through procreation. The only way to have a son through procreation would be to have a spouse. And even God Logics knows this, and so do all the Christians. That's why they've created a theological definition of the statement begotten son to avoid its literal definition, because it is impossible in the literal interpretation. Christians will continue to say it and make this statement that Allah has a begotten son and continue to claim that that's not what they actually mean. It doesn't change the fact that that's what's coming out of their mouths, and they're too stupid to see how stupid the claim is. That's why Allah questions them on it. So Allah can't do it? 39:4 says, if Allah wished to adopt, take a begotten son, walad, a son who was born through procreation, childbirth, he would have chosen from what he created whatever he willed. So Allah shows the Christians he is able to have a begotten son, a son created through procreation, even without a wife, through adopting one, debunking the Christians' claim directly that he needs a wife and therefore is not all-powerful. He would do that by adopting a son from his creation, a son born through procreation. That's the way Allah can have a begotten son, whilst not having a spouse and creating everything. By adopting one from his creation who was born through two creations of Allah procreating. What's funny is that the Christians themselves have completely made a new definition for the term begotten son, but when they challenge Allah if he can have one without a wife, Allah disproves them by showing them he can do it, but sticks to the claim in its literal sense, instead of creating some nonsense theological definition of the statement like the Christians have for their God. Allah shows them it's within his power to, even in the literal definition of the statement, Allah has a son that was made through procreation, whereas the Christians say it over and over again, whilst claiming that's not what they actually mean, and the begotten son is from him, and refuse to directly admit he's just a creation of Allah, even in their belief. Which Allah makes it clear in this verse. If Allah wished to do what they claim, it would be through adoptive means and a son selected from his creation.
You have where the Quran tells you, how can he have a son when he doesn't have a mate?
That's false. That's not what the Quran says. I will correct God Logic's statement with what it actually says, and I've shown proof earlier that the Arabic supports it.
You have where the Quran tells you,
in what way can
he have a son
created through procreation
when he doesn't have a mate?
And he created all things.
Be serious, man. It's illogical to say God is a human being based on those attributes, because humans are limited.
Sure. And would you agree that it's illogical to suggest that Allah would need a mate in order to have a son? That's illogical,
now, let me
right?
correct God Logic's in his statement about what the Quran actually says.
Be serious, man. It's illogical to say God is a human being based on those attributes, because humans are limited.
Sure. And would you agree that it's illogical to suggest that Allah would need a mate in order to have a son?
Who was created through procreation.
That's illogical, right?
Yes, God Logic's. It is illogical to think that Allah can have a son created through procreation when he doesn't even have a mate or a spouse, and he just creates everything. Even the Christians themselves believe God is all-powerful, but will still agree that God still can't do certain things that are contradictory. For example,
of like, can God make a rock so heavy that he can't lift? No,
well, that's contradictory. That within itself.
No, he would never. Yeah, but he wouldn't. He would never do that because that.
Well, no, the answer is that he can't do that because God can't contradict himself. That would actually be a
but
lack.
He would never do that. Is what I'm trying to say. He would never make a rock so heavy that he can't.
Could he?
No.
I agree. No, the answer is no, because God can't contradict himself, right? He can't contradict himself. However, him having a son, has nothing to do with contradicting himself.
God logically cannot have a son created through procreation if he doesn't have a mate. And he creates all things. The only possible way for it to happen, which the Quran even emphasizes, is that Allah would take a begotten son from his creation. So he takes a son that was begotten from his creation and he adopts him. It's not him mating with someone else, it's his creation's mating, making a son, and him adopting it. In this way, it could be logically possible. However, this is not even the Christian claim. They claim that Jesus is the begotten Son of God that he himself is creating, not realizing that the claim itself requires a mate. So Allah can take a son. However, Allah makes it clear throughout the Quran that while it's possible for him to adopt a begotten son, a son created through procreation, which is his creation doing the procreating, he simply adopts it as his own. He has informed us that he never took a begotten son from his creation. He's above doing that, and people lie about it and claim he did do it. Thanks for watching, and as always, Allah knows best.